Welcome back to the deep dive. We've got a stack of notes today that honestly feels a bit heavy, not just, physically, but historically.
It does.
We are looking at a figure who is, well, titan is a word that gets thrown around a lot.
It really does.
But in this case, it might actually be an understatement.
I completely agree. We're talking about someone who exists in the background of, almost all modern intellectual history.
Right.
Yet if you stopped someone on the street, they probably couldn't tell you a single thing he actually believed.
Right. They might know the name, or, maybe they've seen a statue of him in Spain, but they don't really know him. We're talking about Ibn Rushd.
Ibn Rushd.
Or, as he's much, much more famously known in the Western world, Averroes.
The man from Córdoba.
Exactly. And looking at the research here, the biography, the philosophy, the medical treatises, it feels like we aren't just looking at a scholar. We're looking at an intellectual bridge.
That's the perfect word for it.
The specific human link between the Islamic Golden Age and what became the European Renaissance.
That's the key takeaway right at the top. If you want to understand how the works of Aristotle survived the, quote, Dark Ages and eventually sparked the fire of the Renaissance, you can't just jump from ancient Greece to Renaissance Italy. It doesn't work that way. You have to go through Córdoba.
You have to go through Ibn Rushd.
You have to.
So, to give you a sense of the weight this guy carried, just picture the Middle Ages. You're a student in Paris reading, say, Thomas Aquinas or Dante. If they referred to the philosopher with a capital P, who are they talking about?
They meant Aristotle. No name needed. It was just understood. He was simply the philosopher.
But then if they said the commentator with a capital C...
That was Averroes every time. He was the guy. He wasn't just someone who read Aristotle. He was the lens through which the entire Western world came to understand him.
Which is a massive legacy on its own. That's enough for one lifetime. But what's wild about digging into this research is that his resume it's frantic. It's all over the place. He wasn't just a philosopher.
Not at all. Not even close. He was a quadi, a high-ranking judge.
Okay.
He was a physician who, and this is incredible, basically revolutionized how we understand the human eye.
We're definitely getting to that.
And he was an astronomer who was tracking sunspots long before telescopes were a thing.
And of course, the philosopher who made the incredibly brave or maybe dangerous argument that religion and reason aren't enemies.
Which, spoiler alert, is an argument that got him into a whole lot of trouble.
So, that is our mission today. We are going to unpack the life of the man who saved Aristotle for Europe, who challenged the entire medical establishment of his time, and who proposed a theory about our minds that was so controversial it literally got his followers condemned by the Catholic Church.
It's a story of genius, political intrigue, and really a legacy that split the world in two.
So let's start at the beginning. Set the scene for us. Where does a guy like this even come from?
All right, so we're in Al-Andalus, that's modern-day Spain. The year is 1126. He's born in Córdoba on April 14th. And you have to understand, Córdoba at this time wasn't just the city. It was, for all intents and purposes, the city. It was the intellectual capital of the entire Western Islamic world, a center of learning, science, culture, everything.
And he's not exactly born into obscurity, is he? His family background is significant.
Oh, far from it. Ibn Rushd comes from a dynasty of law. His grandfather, who confusingly was also named Ibn Rushd.
Of course.
So historians usually clear it up by calling him the grandfather. He was the imam of the great mosque of Córdoba. He was a massive, massive legal authority.
That is some serious pressure. That's like being born into a family where your grandfather was the Chief Justice of the Supreme Court.
Yeah.
And everyone is just
looking at you
and expecting you to keep up. And he was
Okay.
put on that track from day one. His education is described in all the sources as excellent, which in that context means exhaustive. He memorized the Muwatta. It's the magnum opus of Maliki jurisprudence.
Maliki being one of the 4 major schools of Sunni Islamic law. Correct. So he's studying hadith, the traditions of the Prophet. He's studying theology, jurisprudence, the whole religious curriculum. But then he pivots. He starts studying medicine and philosophy.
And he's not just sitting in a library reading dusty scrolls, right? He's out there. He's networking.
He is. This is key. I found this note about him joining a regular meeting of philosophers and physicians in Seville. You have to picture it like the ultimate intellectual salon of the 12th century.
The place to be.
It really was. This is where the magic happened. He's rubbing shoulders with people like Ibn Tufayl. Now, Ibn Tufayl is a big deal in his own right. He's a famous philosopher and, more importantly, the court physician to the caliph.
So this networking wasn't just social. It was his gateway to power.
It was everything. And that leads us to the cinematic moment, the real turning point of his life. It's 1169. Averroes is introduced to the Almohad Caliph, Abu Yaqub Yusuf.
Okay, so paint the picture. This is a high-stakes room to be in.
Extremely high stakes. The Almohads were a religious dynasty, and they were generally considered quite strict, even fundamentalist in some ways. They came to power on a platform of religious reform.
So, not exactly the kind of guys you'd expect to be chatting about philosophy.
Not at all. But this particular caliph, Abu Yaqub, had a secret. He was an intellectual. He loved philosophy. He was a closet nerd.
So Averroes walks in, introduced by his powerful friend Ibn Tufayl. And the caliph doesn't ask him about the weather. He hits him with a trap question.
It's the ultimate trap. The caliph looks at him and asks, are the heavens eternal, or did they have a beginning?
Okay, let's just pause and unpack why this is terrifying. To a modern ear, that sounds like an astrophysics question, a fun debate. Why is he sweating bullets?
Because in 1169, that's not a question about astrophysics. It's a question of heresy versus loyalty.
Explain that.
Okay, so if you say the heavens are eternal, meaning the universe has always existed with no beginning, you are agreeing with Aristotle. That's the philosopher's answer. But you are directly contradicting the orthodox religious view that God created the universe at a specific moment in time, ex nihilo, out of nothing.
Okay, so if he says eternal, he's a heretic in the eyes of the religious establishment.
A potential heretic. At the very least, he's on thin ice. But if he says, no, they had a beginning, he's contradicting the very philosophy he spent his life studying. He's committing intellectual suicide in front of a caliph who he knows is interested in philosophy.
That's so lose-lose.
Yeah.
There's no right answer.
None, and Averroes knows it. The sources say he just stayed silent. He was terrified. He probably thought his career was over before it began, or worse.
The silence in that room must have been agonizing.
You can just imagine it. But then the caliph does something completely unexpected. He sees that Averroes is panicked, so he turns to Ibn Tufayl and starts answering the question himself. The caliph starts quoting Plato and Aristotle. He starts discussing the nuance of the argument.
So he was testing him. Or he wanted a thinking partner.
I think it's a bit of both. He was signaling, it's okay, I'm one of you. You can speak freely here. He was showing his hand.
And it works.
It works. Once Averroes realizes the caliph is one of them, intellectually speaking, he relaxes. He joins the conversation, and he impresses the caliph so much that the caliph admits something to him. He says that Aristotle's original works are just difficult to understand, too obscure.
And that is the moment. That's when the commentator is born.
That is the exact moment. The caliph gives him the commission of a lifetime. Explain Aristotle, write commentaries, make his work accessible. That single conversation launched a career that would literally shape Western thought for the next 400 years.
But here's the thing I want to drill down on.
Yeah.
He wasn't just summarizing Aristotle for a book club. This wasn't a casual project. He was stepping into an absolute war zone.
Oh, yeah.
The intellectual climate at the time wasn't exactly friendly to philosophy, was it?
Not at all. This brings us to the core conflict of his life, what he called the harmony of religion and philosophy. You have to understand, just before Averroes, there was this massive, sustained attack on philosophy, led by the brilliant theologian Al-Ghazali.
Al-Ghazali, the guy who wrote Ta'afut al-Falasifa.
Which translates to the incoherence of the philosophers.
Which, frankly, is just a brutal title for a book. It's a diss track.
It's a philosophical diss track, and it was incredibly effective.
What was his argument?
Al-Ghazali argued that philosophers, especially those who followed Aristotle, were essentially non-believers. He picked apart their logic on about 20 different points, specifically things like the creation of the world and God's knowledge of particulars, and said it was incompatible with Islam.
And this was the prevailing mood. Philosophy was seen as suspect, foreign, maybe even dangerous.
Exactly. So Averroes decides to write a point-by-point rebuttal, and he titles it, wait for it, Ta'afut al-Ta'afut.
The incoherence of the incoherence.
He's throwing it right back. He's saying, no, your attack on philosophy is what's actually incoherent.
But beyond the snappy titles, what was his actual defense? This is the crucial part. How do you reconcile reason and revelation when they seem to say completely opposite things?
His core thesis is found in a shorter book, a little gem called The Decisive Treatise. And the argument is beautiful in its simplicity. He just says truth cannot contradict truth.
Okay, expand on that. What does that mean in practice?
Well, he argues that the revelation in the Quran is true. That's his baseline. He's a devout believer.
Right.
But he also argues that philosophy, which is just the rigorous use of human reason, also leads to truth. Since there is only one ultimate truth, these two paths, revelation and reason, cannot possibly conflict in the end. They have to lead to the same place.
Okay, but they often seem to conflict. I mean, scripture says one thing, science or logic says another. That's the whole problem.
And this is his brilliant move. Averroes says that if they appear to conflict, it's not because reason is wrong. It's because we are interpreting the scripture too literally.
So if science proves, say, that the earth revolves around the sun, and a verse in the Quran seems to say the sun moves, he's saying you shouldn't throw out the science.
Correct. He argues that in those specific cases, the scripture must be interpreted allegorically, metaphorically. He's saying the sacred text is using an image to convey a deeper truth to the common people, but the philosopher, the person of demonstration, can understand the literal scientific reality behind that metaphor.
That feels incredibly modern. That's basically how many religious scientists operate today.
It was revolutionary. But he went even further. He didn't just say philosophy was allowed. He argued that the Quran actually obligates the intellectual elite to study it.
How did he justify that?
He pointed to verses that tell believers to reflect on God's creation, on the heavens and the earth. He said, look, God gave us minds. He gave us this incredible creation. He clearly wants us to use our brains to understand his work. The creation reveals the creator.
The artisan, as he called him.
The artisan. So for him, philosophy wasn't just allowed. It was the highest form of worship. It was mandatory for those capable of it.
But he didn't think everyone should be doing this, right? This is a key distinction. He wasn't a Democrat about knowledge.
No, absolutely not. And this is where we have to be careful not to paint him as a modern liberal. He was an elitist through and through. He believed in a very strict hierarchy of intellect.
Right. He broke society down into 3 classes based on how they digest truth.
Yes, and this is fascinating. Let's go through them.
Okay.
First, you have the rhetorical class. This is the vast majority of people, the masses. They are moved by persuasion, by sermons, by poetry, emotion, and simple stories.
So that's the Sunday sermon. Or a politician giving a stump speech. They respond to the literal, surface-level text of Scripture.
Exactly. And that's what keeps them virtuous. It's what they need. Then you move up a level to the dialectical class.
And
these are the theologians, the debaters. They use logic, but they use it to defend premises they already believe in. They aren't really searching for new truth. They're defending the fort.
The apologists.
The apologists. And finally, at the very top of the pyramid, you have the demonstrative class.
The philosophers.
The philosophers, the guys who do the math. They use pure, cold, logical deduction to arrive at absolute proof. For Averroes, this demonstrative truth was the highest form. But, and here's the catch, he believed it was incredibly dangerous to mix the levels.
Dangerous how? What did he think would happen?
He thought if you took these high-level philosophical proofs, which might sound like they contradict the literal scripture, and you tried to explain them to the rhetorical masses, you wouldn't enlighten them, you would just confuse them, shake their faith, and cause social chaos.
So he was basically saying the masses need the story, the philosophers need the proof. It's all the same truth, but it has to be packaged differently for different audiences.
Precisely. He effectively said to his fellow philosophers, don't talk about this stuff in public. It was a survival strategy for philosophy. He wanted to protect the right to think freely, but he thought the only way to do that was to keep it within an elite, closed circle.
Which, ironically, is probably one of the things that got him in trouble later on. People don't like being told there's a secret truth they're not smart enough to handle.
No, they do not.
But before we get to his downfall, we have to talk about the idea that made him famous and infamous in Europe, the one that really set the world on fire.
Yes.
The unity of the intellect.
Monopsychism. This is the big one. If you're a student of medieval philosophy, this is the radioactive core of Averroism.
Okay, walk us through this. He's writing his long commentary on Aristotle's On the Soul. And he comes up with a theory that, you said it before, it sounds like science fiction.
It really does. So he's trying to solve a problem in Aristotle about how human beings come to know universal truths. How do I know the concept of dog, not just my specific dog, Fido?
With the abstract idea.
Exactly. And his solution is to propose that there is only one material intellect for all of humanity.
One mind.
One mind.
Shared by everyone.
Essentially, yes. He argues that this intellect is a separate, eternal substance. It's unmixed with any individual body, and it's singular.
Okay, I have to stop you there. Because I'm definitely thinking my own thoughts right now.
I hope so.
I'm thinking about this microphone. I'm thinking about lunch. You're thinking about Aristotle. How can we possibly share one mind if we are all thinking different private things?
That is the million-dollar question. And Averroes had a very specific, very clever answer. He distinguished between the universal intellect and something he called fic.
Fic, F-I-K-R.
In Latin, it was translated as cogitatio.
And what is fic?
Fic is the active consideration of specific things. It's your brain processing sensory data, the images you see from your eyes, the memories you have of your childhood, the specific dog you are looking at right now. Those are individual. Those belong to you and your body.
So my memories are mine. My sensory experiences are mine. That part is personal.
Yes. But the capacity to abstract that sensory data into a universal concept, to understand that this dog and every dog are all part of the universal idea of dogness, or to understand a mathematical proof like 2 + 2 = 4, that higher level processing happens in the shared universal intellect.
Okay, I'm going to try an analogy here. Tell me if this works.
Go for it.
It sounds like cloud computing.
Okay, go on.
We all have our own laptops. That's our bodies and our individual brains. I have my own files on my desktop, my own photos. That's my fic or my memories.
Right.
But when I want to run a massive calculation or access the vastness of the internet, I'm connecting to the cloud. The cloud is one thing shared by everyone. My laptop is just a terminal.
That is a surprisingly and slightly unnerving, accurate analogy for a 12th century metaphysical concept.
Yeah.
Yes, the cloud is the material intellect. It's where true universal knowledge resides and happens. Your brain is just the access point.
So why was this so controversial? On the surface, it sounds kind of poetic. We're all connected. One humanity, one mind. What's the problem?
It sounds poetic until you ask the immediate follow-up question, what happens when I die?
Oh, right.
If the part of me that is eternal, that is rational, the part that truly thinks, if that part isn't mine but just belongs to this shared cloud, then when my laptop breaks, when my body dies, what's left of me?
My local files are gone, my terminal is offline, and the cloud just keeps going without me?
Exactly. It directly implies there is no personal immortality, no individual soul that survives death to be judged, to be punished in hell or rewarded in heaven.
And for the medieval Catholic Church, and for mainstream Islam for that matter, that is an absolute deal breaker.
It's a massive heresy. It destroys the entire moral fabric of revealed religion. If I don't survive death as an individual, why should I be good? Why should I fear God's judgment? The whole system collapses.
I can see why Thomas Aquinas wasn't a fan.
Not a fan is putting it so mildly. Aquinas wrote a specific book, a polemic, called On the Unity of the Intellect against the Averroists. He attacked this idea relentlessly. He felt it was a poison that would destroy the foundations of Christianity if it wasn't stamped out.
It's just amazing that a commentary on an ancient Greek text could cause such a theological panic. But it shows how seriously they took these ideas.
They took them as seriously as we take political ideologies or economic theories today. This was the battleground of truth.
We've talked a lot about the philosopher, but we cannot ignore the scientist. Because as you said, if he had never written a single word about Aristotle, he'd still be famous for his medicine, right?
Absolutely. He wrote a medical encyclopedia called Al-Kuliat fi al-Tibb, which was known in Latin for centuries as the College. And again, just like with philosophy, he wasn't just copying old texts. He was observing and correcting them.
The eye thing. When I was reading about that, it blew my mind.
The retina.
Yes. Explain what the prevailing theory was before him. Who was the authority?
The authority was Galen, the ancient Greek physician who was basically the god of medicine for over 1,000 years. What Galen said went. And Galen thought that the lens of the eye was the photoreceptor. He thought it was the part that actually sensed light.
Which I guess makes intuitive sense. It's the clear part right in the middle. It seems important.
It does. But Averroes, based on his understanding of anatomy, said, no, that can't be right. The lens just focuses. It's the retina, that net-like coating at the back of the eye. That's what actually receives the light and sends the image to the brain.
That is a fundamental leap in anatomy and neuroscience.
Oh.
And he was completely right.
He was. And he didn't stop there. He challenged Galen on the cause of strokes, too. Galen had this theory that strokes were caused by obstructions in the peripheral nerves.
It is not right.
Not right at all. Averroes realized, no, this is happening in the brain. He proposed that it was an obstruction of the arteries leading from the heart to the brain. He was getting much, much closer to the modern understanding.
He was literally mapping out the vascular system's connection to neurology.
He was. And there's more. He gave one of the earliest clinical descriptions of what we now recognize as Parkinson's disease symptoms. He didn't name it, of course, but he described the tremors.
And he identified the concept of acquired immunity.
With smallpox, yes. He observed that if a patient got smallpox and survived, they never got it again. He understood on some level that the body learned to defend itself.
Which is the entire basis of all modern immunology and vaccination.
It is. He was a keen observer. That's the common thread. He didn't just accept authority, he looked at the world, whether it was a text, a patient, or the sky.
And he did look at the sky, too.
He did. He was an astronomer who actually had big problems with the Ptolemaic system.
Why? I thought everyone used Ptolemy's model of the universe back then.
They did, but Averroes was a curist. He was an Aristotelian purist. The problem with Ptolemy's system was that it was messy. To explain why planets seemed to move backwards sometimes, Ptolemy had to invent these things called epicycles, little circles that planets made while moving on their bigger circles.
Circles within circles.
Exactly. For Averroes, this was an ugly mathematical hack. He believed Aristotelian physics demanded that celestial motion had to be perfectly uniformly circular around a single center. He couldn't come up with a better mathematical model. He admitted he failed to reform astronomy completely, but his critique was so powerful it inspired later astronomers to keep looking.
And didn't he spot something on the sun?
He did. He and another astronomer, Ibn Bajjah, observed dark spots on the sun. Now, their worldview didn't allow for the sun to be imperfect or have blemishes.
Right.
So they interpreted what they saw as the transits of Venus and Mercury passing in front of the sun. But modern calculations have shown they were almost certainly observing sunspots with the naked eye.
The man was a polymath in the truest sense of the word. But we have to remember his day job through all of this. We touched on it earlier. He was a judge, a qadi.
And not just any judge. His legal work, particularly his book Bidayat al-Mujtahid, is still studied in Islamic law schools today. It's considered a masterpiece of comparative jurisprudence.
What made it so special? Was it just a list of rules like other law books?
That's what most legal texts were. This is forbidden, this is allowed. The punishment for X is Y. Averroes took a completely different approach. He didn't just give the answer. He explained why the great jurists disagreed.
He showed his work.
He showed all the work, he identified the causes of difference. He would say, look, the Maliki school says this and the Hanafi school says that. The reason they disagree is because this word in the Quran is ambiguous, or because they're using different analogies to a known case. He treated the dissent with profound respect.
That sounds incredibly fair-minded and intellectually honest.
It was. He was an independent thinker, even in law, a field that values tradition above all else. And this independence, this willingness to think from first principles, led him to some social views that were, well, pretty radical for the 12th century.
You're talking about his views on women.
Specifically, yeah, this is one of the most fascinating parts of his commentary on Plato's Republic.
So Plato, in his ideal state, argued that women should be guardians. They should rule and fight alongside men.
Right. And most medieval commentators, Christian or Muslim, would probably just gloss over that part or say, well, that's some crazy Greek talk, let's move on.
But Averroes didn't.
He doubled down on it. He looked at his own society in Al-Andalus and said, essentially, we are wasting half our potential.
He made an economic argument, didn't he? It wasn't just about fairness.
It was a deeply practical argument. He lamented that women in his society were limited to childbearing and domestic duties. He said this reduced them to a burden on the state because they weren't contributing to the economy or the common defense. He argued that women could and should be soldiers, philosophers, and even rulers if they were just given the same education and opportunity as men.
That is a massive what-if moment for history.
Yeah.
I mean, imagine if that view had actually taken hold in the 12th century.
It's tragic in a way. He saw the potential for a much stronger, more dynamic society, but the culture just wasn't ready to hear it.
Speaking of things the culture wasn't ready for, let's talk about the fall from grace. Because for a long time, Averroes was the golden boy. He's the friend of the caliph, the chief judge of Seville, a court physician. But then 1195 happens.
The wheel of fortune turns, as it always does. The old caliph, his patron, has died. His son, Abu Yusuf Yaqub, who took the title Al-Mansur, is in charge now.
And Al-Mansur has a problem.
He has a big political problem. He needs to rally support for a massive jihad against the Christian kingdoms in the north of Spain. And to get that support, he needs the religious conservatives on his side.
He needs the orthodox ulema.
Yeah.
The theologians and jurists.
The very same ulema who do not like Averroes. They see his philosophy as foreign, dangerous, and heretical. So Averroes becomes a political pawn. To appease the fundamentalists and drum up support for the war, the caliph throws him under the bus.
And it wasn't just a quiet firing. It was a public humiliation.
It was a show trial. A tribunal was convened in Córdoba, and he was formally condemned. They ordered that his books on philosophy be collected and burned.
Ugh, that image always hurts. Burning books.
It's the ultimate symbol of rejecting knowledge. He was then banished to a small town called Lucena, which was mostly inhabited by Jews. He was isolated, disgraced, and forbidden from continuing his work.
He did get a reprieve at the very end, though, right? It wasn't the end of the story.
He did. A couple of years later, once the political winds shifted back again, the caliph called him back to favor in Marrakesh. But he was an old man by then, likely broken by the exile. He died shortly after, in December of 1198.
And here is the great final twist of the knife. He dies. He's eventually reburied in his hometown of Córdoba. But what happens to his legacy in the Islamic world?
It largely evaporates, it fades away. The intellectual center of the Islamic world had shifted east to Cairo and Damascus, and they had moved on. They were more interested in the philosophy of Avicenna, or had turned away from Greek philosophy entirely towards mysticism.
So in his own world, he becomes a minor figure.
A respected jurist, but a philosophical dead end. But in the West.
In the West, he explodes.
He becomes a giant, an absolute titan.
It's the ultimate irony. The man who was banished and had his books burned by a Muslim caliph becomes the father of rationalism for Christian Europe.
His commentaries were translated first into Hebrew by Jewish scholars in Spain and France, and then from Hebrew into Latin. They flooded into the new universities, being born in Paris, Padua, Bologna, and they started a movement.
Latin Everism.
Exactly. You had these radical thinkers, guys like Siguraf of Brabant and Boethius of Dacia at the University of Paris. They took Averroes' most controversial ideas, like the eternity of the world and the unity of the intellect, and they ran with them. They were pushing the absolute boundaries of what the church could tolerate.
And as we mentioned with Aquinas, the church pushed back.
Oh, they pushed back hard. In 1270 and again in 1277, the Bishop of Paris issued formal condemnations. They listed 219 specific philosophical theses that were forbidden to be taught or even discussed at the university. A huge number of them were pure Averroism.
Yet, despite the bans, he stuck around. You can't really kill an idea once it's out there.
You can't. He was too important, too useful to ignore. Even his enemies had to respect his intellect. We talked about Dante. In his Divine Comedy, he places Averroes in limbo.
That's the nice part of hell.
It is. It's for the virtuous pagans, the great minds who lived before Christ or outside the faith. He's there in this noble castle of thought, sitting alongside Euclid, Ptolemy, and even Saladin. And Dante describes him as the one who made the great commentary.
And then Raphael puts him right in the middle of the Vatican.
In the School of Athens, one of the most famous paintings in the world. It's a celebration of human knowledge. And if you look closely, peering over the shoulder of Pythagoras, there's a man in a green robe and a white turban. That's Averroes. He is literally inside the heart of the Vatican, immortalized as one of the pillars of Western wisdom.
I love that story by the Argentine writer Jorge Luis Borges about him, Averroes' Search.
Oh, that's a brilliant, brilliant piece of literature.
It just captures the tragedy of the translation gap so perfectly.
Right.
It's about Averroes trying to translate Aristotle's Poetics. He comes across the words tragedy and comedy, but he has no frame of reference.
None at all. Theater as we know it didn't exist in the Islamic world of his time. So Borges describes him looking out his window, seeing some children playing make-believe, and trying to deduce from that what a play or a stage could possibly be. He's a genius trying to grasp a concept without any of the cultural context.
It's such a powerful metaphor for the whole project, the difficulty of one culture understanding another.
But it also humanizes him. He was a giant, but he was still a man working with the tools and the information he had.
So let's try and bring this all together. What does this all mean for us? We have a devout Muslim judge born in Spain whose books were burned by his own government, who ends up becoming the foundation for Western scholasticism and a hero to secular rationalists.
It's the ultimate irony of history, isn't it? Averroes represents a path not taken by his own civilization, but a path that, in a way, saved another. He drew a line in the sand and said that faith and reason could coexist, that you didn't have to choose between God and Aristotle.
And that idea that you don't have to check your brain at the door of the mosque or the church or the synagogue, his truly enduring legacy.
Absolutely. He was a champion of the intellect. He believed, fundamentally, that human beings were designed to think, that using our reason to understand the world was not an act of rebellion against God, but the highest form of worship.
It really makes you wonder about those what-ifs. If the Almohad Caliphate hadn't turned on him, if his rationalism had become the dominant strain of thought, if that argument for women in society had been heard, how different would the last 800 years have looked?
It's one of the great counterfactuals of history. A world where Córdoba, not Paris, remained the center of avant-garde philosophy might have accelerated the scientific revolution by centuries. We just don't know.
I want to leave you with one final thought to mull over. We talk about his most controversial theory, the unity of the intellect. This idea that we all share one big mind, like a cloud server.
Right.
In his time, that was heresy. It seemed to erase the individual. But think about us today. We are constantly plugged into the internet. We offload our memory to Google. We process information and form opinions collectively on social media. We are feeding all our thoughts and all our knowledge into AI models that aggregate everything humanity has ever written.
That is a slightly chilling thought.
Isn't it? Are we right now building a technological version of Averroes' single shared mind? Maybe he wasn't wrong. Maybe he was just 800 years early.
Perhaps the material intellect is just a server farm in the desert somewhere.
On that note, thanks for diving deep with us.
Keep thinking.
See you next time.